The Committee on Science, Space, and Technology will come to order. Without objection, the chair is authorized to declare recesses of the committee at any time. Pursuant to Committee Rule 2E and House Rule 112H4, the chair announces that he may postpone roll call votes. Today, we meet to consider H.R. 4084, the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act. Pursuant to notice, I now call up H.R. 4084, the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, and the clerk will report the bill.
H.R. 4084 to enable civilian research and development of advanced nuclear energy technologies by private and public institutions.
And without objection, the bill is considered as read and open for amendment at any point. I have an amendment in the nature of a substitute which has been distributed. Without objection, the amendment will be considered as read and as original text for purposes of amendment. And I'll recognize myself for an opening statement. Today, the Science Committee considers H.R. 4084, the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act. This bipartisan legislation sets congressional priorities for long-term research and development investments. These R&D investments will maintain American technological leadership. Nuclear energy represents promising emission-free technology and America's best opportunity to bring reliable electricity to the developing world. H.R. 4084 harnesses the strengths of the national labs, universities, and private sector and will breathe new life into America's research and technology communities. I want to thank the Energy Subcommittee Chairman Randy Weber and Science Committee Ranking Member Eddie Bernice Johnson for their leadership on this issue and for introducing this bill. Many other members of the Science Committee are co-sponsors, including Representatives Lipinski, Loudermilk, Perlmutter, Comstock, Tonko, Bridenstine, Babin, Rohrabacher, Holken, Westerman, Knight, Posey, Lucas, and Nagelbauer. H.R. 4084 provides the Department of Energy with the direction and certainty it needs to develop long-term research and development planning and infrastructure within its Office of Nuclear Energy. This legislation authorizes DOE to take advantage of the National Lab supercomputers in order to accelerate R&D for advanced fission and fusion reactor concepts with the help and expertise of the private sector, universities, and national labs. The bill also puts forth a timeline for DOE to complete a research reactor user facility within 10 years that will enable proprietary and academic research to validate supercomputing models. Finally, H.R. 4084 creates a reliable mechanism for the private sector to partner with DOE labs and develop advanced fission and fusion prototype reactors at DOE sites. The amendment in the nature of a substitute updates the Nuclear Energy R&D subtitle of the Energy Policy Act of 2005 and makes provisions of today's bill part of that law. The amendment also includes language provided by Representative Foster that requires DOE to consider the life cycle and lifetime operating cost of the user facility proposed in this bill. And I thank Mr. Foster for this improvement. Nuclear power has been a proven source of safe and emission-free electricity for over half a century since it was first developed in the United States. Strategic investments in advanced nuclear reactor technology should play a much more meaningful role in reducing global emissions. However, our ability to move from R&D to market deployment has been hampered by government red tape. The U.S. has not lived up to its potential when it comes to nuclear energy. This legislation enables our talented engineers in the private sector, academia, and at the national labs to develop the next generation of nuclear technology here in the United States. H.R. 4084 implements bipartisan, long-term R&D investments that will spur American competitiveness and keep us on the forefront of nuclear energy technology. Nuclear energy can be a clean, cheap answer to an energy-independent, pro-growth, secure future if we let the science and market forces prevail. That concludes my opening statement, and the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Johnson, the ranking member, is recognized for hers.
Thank you very much, and good morning. Mr. Chairman, I'm delighted that you're holding this markup of H.R. 4084, the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, which I'm very pleased to co-sponsor with you. As I've noted before, nuclear power plays a vital role in providing our country with clean, reliable energy. As people on this committee already know, I'm very concerned about the growing threat of climate change. Just experienced a lot of hurricanes, tornadoes in my area. Nuclear power can and should play a key role in in our efforts to reduce the carbon footprint of our electricity sector. But there currently are technical, economic, and policy concerns and challenges that prevent nuclear energy from playing a larger role in enabling our clean energy future. The Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act takes several positive steps to address these challenges. Implementing the provisions in this bill will help accelerate the development of advanced nuclear energy technologies that are safer, less expensive, more efficient, and produce less waste than the current generation of nuclear reactors. It is my hope that the provisions in this bill can aid in ensuring a bright future for the U.S. nuclear energy industry. I know we can find bipartisan support for this effort not only on this committee, but more broadly in the Congress. I want to, where is it? Sorry. Yes. Got the attention of the unknown. I do want to point out one concern I have about this bill. Despite being an authorization of programs, we do not specifically recommend funding levels for the nuclear program at DOE. While I do recognize the difficulty of authorizing funding levels these days, I think it is an important function of our committee. As we move this bill forward, I hope it is something we can revisit. On that note, I'd like to once again express my appreciation for the process we followed to put this bill together. The majority and minority staff worked closely together every step of the way, from engaging stakeholders through helping to craft and incorporate suggested changes to the language. This is a great example of what we can achieve when we put politics aside and join forces to address the challenges facing our nation's research enterprise. I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I urge my colleagues to support this bill.
Thank you, Ms. Johnson. We will now go to the amendments listed in order on the roster, and the first one was possibly going to be offered by Mr. Foster, whom I don't see here. So we will go to the next amendment. Oh. Oh, I am sorry. From Texas, I was in too much of a rush. The gentleman from Texas is recognized for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I promise I've turned my cell phone off. Good morning, and I do want to thank Ranking Member Johnson and Chairman Smith for co-sponsoring H.R. 4084, the Nuclear Energy Innovation Capabilities Act, and for their leadership in gathering support for nuclear energy R&D. It is indeed an honor to work with fellow Texans to guide research that will keep America safe, globally competitive, and support innovation in our economy. I also want to thank the other Science Committee members who have co-sponsored this bill and encourage others who haven't yet to support this important legislation. The Science Committee has spent over a year examining U.S. nuclear energy policy in preparation for this legislation. The Energy Subcommittee that I chair has held hearings on supercomputing, advanced nuclear energy technology, the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, and the DOE Energy Innovation Hubs. Witnesses from the national labs, universities, and the private sectors have all testified in support of various reforms and policy outlined in this bill. By taking our time and working together and listening to all the relevant stakeholders, we've been able to develop that bipartisan bill with extensive support, and again, we thank the other members who have joined into this effort. I'd like to introduce, Mr. Chairman, the following 11 support letters into the record from the American Nuclear Society, the U.S. Nuclear Infrastructure Council, Bipartisan Policy Center, Texas A&M, University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, MIT General Atomics, the John Hines Professor of Management at the Harvard Business School, Joe Lasseter, and Dr. Burton Richter, who won the Nobel Prize in Physics in 1976.
Okay. With that objection, so ordered.
This legislation provides important policy direction for the DOE Office of Nuclear Energy. First, we provide the DOE with statutory direction to leverage its supercomputing infrastructure for modeling and simulation capabilities to develop advanced fission and fusion, Mr. Grayson, reactors. Second, the bill lays out a clear timeline and statutory guidance for DOE to complete a research reactor that will allow for materials and fuels R&D to take place in the United States. Currently, this type of research, which requires access to fast neutrons, unfortunately, is only accessible for civilian use in Russia. And while modeling and simulation can accelerate R&D, this research must ultimately be validated through a physical source. The versatile neutron source under Section 6 of H.R. 4084 will enable this vital research. Third, and perhaps at least as important, if not the most important, is this legislation provides DOE with statutory direction to use its authority to enable the national labs to partner with the private sector to construct and operate reactor prototypes at DOE sites and to leverage that expertise from the Nuclear Regulatory Commission in the process. Because nuclear reactors are expensive and highly regulated, designing a first-of-a-kind reactor requires a blend of creative freedom from engineers testing new designs, but also assurance of safety throughout that process. DOE sites, particularly the DOE National Labs, can provide a unique environment that safety allows for this kind of creative testing and development for advanced nuclear technology. America must maintain our R&D capabilities and continue to develop that cutting-edge nuclear technology right here at home. Without the prioritization outlined in this bill, we will lose the ability to develop innovative nuclear technology and be left importing reactor designs from overseas. Right now, we have the best nuclear and engineers and manufacturing capacity in the world. America's export economy is a key to our global strength, and this bill will provide a long-term plan to ensure that we do not lose our talent. Even more importantly, this bill will maintain America's capability to influence security and proliferation standards around the world as more developing nations explore nuclear energy. As a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee, I am constantly reminded of the need for American leadership in a dangerous world. H.R. 4084 makes it clear that the United States is committed to advancing this critical area of technology. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Weber. Also, without objection, the ranking member, Ms. Johnson, and I would like to put letters from the University of Texas System and from Texas A&M supporting this legislation in the record. We will now proceed with our amendments, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Foster, is recognized for his.
Thank you. I have an amendment at the desk.
And with the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4084, offered by Mr. Foster of Illinois.
And without objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman Smith, Ranking Member Johnson, and everyone involved for their hard work on this bipartisan bill. I'd like to thank the nuclear and scientific research community, as well as the nuclear industry, who've contributed to the thoughtful work behind this bill. I've had the opportunity to share it with many experts, including Nobel laureates that I know and respect, and have found their reactions to be very positive overall. The amendment that I'm offering today is one that I hope will highlight a concern that I share with Dr. Burton Richter, a Nobel Prize-winning physicist and a member of the Nuclear Blue Ribbon Panel and chair of numerous nuclear review committees, a real expert in the field. And his letter, I believe, was one that was incorporated into the record. My amendment refers to the budgetary guidance in this bill. As pointed out in the second to last paragraph of Dr. Richter's letter, Section 8 of this bill asks the Department of Energy to spend the next year studying 3 different budget scenarios for nuclear energy research, and to ask how the programs described in this bill might fit into them. First, they're to look at a flat budget with no adjustments for inflation, which corresponds to a cut in real purchasing power. Secondly, there's a budget with a 2% per year nominal increase over the next decade, which means basically flat purchasing power if inflation continues at 2% per year, or an actual cut if inflation returns closer to historical levels as the markets and many others anticipate. And thirdly, an unconstrained budget where, of course, there will be no problem paying for all of this, the entire proposed program, but this is, I think we'd all agree, politically unlikely. So as I'm sure many people are aware, it's a common technique in budget discussions to propose three budgets, one obviously too high, one obviously too low, and a realistic intermediate budget scenario. Sometimes this is called Goldilocks budgeting, where one scenario is too high, one too low, and one is just right. This is a technique that's used to build support for the intermediate, hopefully realistic budget scenario. So it's very important that the intermediate budget scenario be realistic, since that is the one that people will be taking most seriously, and that is the one that most of the work will be put into during the year-long budget study. The difficulty, as pointed out in the letter by Dr. Richter that has been distributed and entered into the record, is that the intermediate budget scenario in the bill as it stands does not represent a workable basis for carrying out the scope of work described in this bill, when combined with the ongoing program and responsibilities of the nuclear energy program. My amendment makes a simple change. It changes the budgetary guidance of the intermediate case from a 2% nominal budget increase per year to a 2% increase above inflation. It adds the two words above inflation. It's worth noting that even this budget increase is unlikely to fully fund the scope of work described in this bill. Dr. Richter's rough estimate, which is in his letter, is that the fast neutron facility will be in the $1.5 to $2 billion range. And an annual increase of 2% above inflation, as provided by my amendment, would only provide roughly half of that new money required for this facility. So if my amendment is adopted, then Congress will be essentially asking the DOE to spend 1 year studying the question: if we give you about half of the new money that you need for this new facility and an increase in the base program, then how much are you going to be willing to squeeze out of the base program in order to obtain this new facility? Conversely, if my amendment is not adopted, the result will be predictable. The DOE will respond to the low budget by saying, okay, we can have no new facilities on the low budget, and in fact propose a list of cuts to the base program. DOE will respond to the intermediate budget by saying that they can preserve the base program depending on inflation, but that no new facilities can be contemplated. And obviously, DOE will respond to the unconstrained budget by saying, of course, we can do all this if you give us unlimited money. But Congress is never going to get the answer that we really are interested in, namely, how much is DOE willing to squeeze the base program in order to obtain the new facilities and programs described in H.R. 4084. Now, I personally spent 23 years of my life as a scientist at one of our national labs, planning, carrying out, and managing large technical projects. And I know that nothing is more damaging to the morale of an organization than asking people to plan a program without giving adequate budget guidance. And nothing is a bigger waste of everyone's time than to ask people to plan for a program that can only be carried out under budget scenarios that are very unlikely to happen. Now, we have an opportunity to fix this problem with my amendment and to make the 1 year study a useful planning document. Now, I want to make it clear that I support this bill. I intend to vote for it. It's my understanding that the chairman is not going to be supporting my amendment. Is that correct?
Not at the present time, that is correct.
Yeah, and so I don't think it's a useful exercise to have a party line vote on this, so I intend to withdraw my amendment. But I really encourage everyone who truly supports this bill to think hard and talk with the experts about the budget, and to understand that you can't ask a program like nuclear energy to do more without acknowledging that the budget must be increased in real terms. And the problem is aggravated by the fact that typically the rate of inflation for technical projects exceeds the consumer price index inflation. And so that even 2% per year, as is in the base text of this document, is unlikely to do it. And I would really encourage everyone, as this moves forward under the watchful eye of the majority, to try to look at more realistic budget scenarios for the intermediate budget scenario. Well, thank you, and with that, I withdraw my amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Foster, for withdrawing the amendment. As you pointed out, budget constraints unfortunately are always with us and have to be considered. That said, your comments were very persuasive and I thought trenchant, and so we'll continue to work with you on that. Appreciate that very much. The next amendment, I believe, will be offered by the gentleman from California, Mr. Rohrbacher, if he still wants to offer that amendment, and if so, he is recognized for that purpose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I am, of course, very supportive of the purpose of this bill, but I am concerned, and, excuse me, I have an amendment at the desk.
Okay, the clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment offered by Mr. Rohrbacher of California. At the end of the bill, add the following. Section 9, limitation. Nothing in this act or the amendments made by this act authorizes research on light water reactors.
And without objection, the amendment is considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
Well, thank you very much. Again, I'm very supportive of the purpose of this bill. I'm a co-sponsor of it, but I'm concerned that programs in this legislation will be mostly focused on light water reactors. Those of us who've been involved with this issue for a long time understand that the Department of Energy already has significant programs focused on these reactors, and we have actually had federal spending and science projects focused on light water reactors since before I was born. And we have had expert witnesses give us testimony stating very clearly that we should be moving away from light water reactors. And what should be our purpose is actually we should go beyond light water reactors and go to the next step of nuclear development. And I'm afraid that this legislation will still have considerable focus on these light water reactors, which we, again, can move beyond and go to the next generation, which solves many of the problems we face today. We could have technology that minimizes nuclear waste, eliminates proliferation risks, eliminates the meltdown risks, eliminates hydrogen explosive threats, and systems that increase efficiency, and systems that could help us develop new cutting-edge weapon systems. These should be our goals, not just perfecting light water reactors, as I say, which have been around and we spent a lot of money on already. There are many ideas about potential new technologies for new small modular nuclear reactors, pebble-based systems, high-temperature gas-cooled systems, thorium-based systems. Lockheed even has a small modular reactor in concept now that is based on fusion. So with that, and again, light water reactors are not safe. They are inherently not safe as compared to what we could develop in the future. So my bill simply suggests, my amendment simply suggests that that none of the money in the bill go to the study of light water reactors. And with that, I'd like to express my appreciation for your leadership, Mr. Chairman, but also leadership of Mr. Weber on this issue. And we thank him for being a positive thinker and not just a reactor. I had to do that. With that, Mr. Chairman, now that I have had that say, and I would like to, and I've drawn the attention to this issue of making sure that we are spending our limited dollars, and we have limited dollars every time we come, whatever issue we come before, we have a limited budget, so we have to make sure that money is being spent in exactly the right way. Prioritize is the name of the game, and I would hope that we prioritize our focus on new technology rather than perfecting light water reactors, which is old technology.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrbacher. Appreciate your comments, and do you want to withdraw the amendment?
Understanding that the chairman and I will be working together on this issue, and I appreciate your leadership on the nuclear reactor issue that I withdraw this amendment.
Thank you, and yes, we will continue to work with you on that. Our last amendment that I'm aware of today will be offered by the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Grayson, and he is recognized for that purpose.
I have an amendment at the
And the
desk.
clerk shall report the amendment.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 40.
I ask unanimous consent the amendment be considered as
Without
read.
objection, the amendment will be considered as read, and the gentleman is recognized to explain his amendment.
The amendment at the desk will help to guide the future of fusion energy research. It requires the Secretary of the Department of Energy, within 6 months of the enactment of the bill, to submit a report to Congress that identifies engineering designs for innovative fusion energy systems that have the potential to demonstrate net energy production within 15 years after the start of construction. It would also identify the budgetary requirements necessary to carry out a fusion innovation initiative, which would accelerate fusion research and development. I yield the balance of my time.
Thank you, Mr. Grayson. I'll recognize myself, and I do want to thank the gentleman from Florida for offering this amendment. He has been outspoken and persuasive in his support for fusion energy research and development. This amendment would require the Secretary of Energy to report to Congress on options to accelerate research and development for innovation in fusion energy, which is truly a high-risk, high-reward area of science and technology. I support the amendment and encourage my colleagues to do the same. Are there any other comments on
Mr.
the
Chairman?
gentleman from California? Mr. Rohrabacher is recognized.
Let me just note that fusion has been the dream for a long time. And again, just like water reactors, we have spent a lot of money on fusion research with very little to show for it. However, with that said, in the last year, there has been some movement forward on fusion for the first time in a long time. And Lockheed, I understand, now has a concept that they're working on and beginning to develop for a small modular fusion energy reactor. And I believe that this amendment that is being proposed will cover such things, and we'll get a chance to look at it to see if there's some viability, and I support the amendment. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rohrabacher. Is there any further discussion on the amendment? If not, the question is on agreeing to the amendment offered by Mr. Grayson. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The amendment is agreed to. Are there any other amendments? And if not, the question is on agreeing to the amendment in the nature of a substitute. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is agreed to. Reporting quorum being present, I move that the Committee on Science, Space, and Technology report H.R. 4084 to the House as amended with the recommendation that the bill be approved. The question is on favorably reporting H.R. 4084 to the House as amended. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed, nay. The ayes have it, and the bill is ordered reported favorably. Without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. H.R. 4084 is ordered reported to the House, and I ask unanimous consent that staff be authorized to make any necessary technical and conforming changes, and without objection, so ordered. I thank all the members for their attendance today. This was a good bipartisan bill that is going to have a real positive impact on research and development in regard to nuclear energy, so I thank them all for their support. If there's no further discussion, that completes our business and concludes the Science Committee markup. And without objection, the committee stands adjourned.